Welcome to the weekly Torah perspective, Parshas Vayishlach, the story of the meeting between two brothers, Yaakov and Esav, who have been estranged from each other for a number of decades. And Yaakov takes the initiative for this meeting by sending messages to Esav with the message, "I'm coming to meet you." The Medrash in Bereshis Rabbah seems to criticize Yaakov. Rav Huna opens the proceedings with quoting a verse, a passage in the book of Mishlei, Proverbs, in 27th chapter, 17th verse. Machazik ba'ozne kelev over misaber al rivlo lo. Someone who passes by and mixes himself in a conflict that doesn't concern him can be likened to someone who grabs a dog by its ears. Shmuel ben Bar Nachman continues and says, Moshel, this is a parable. It should be likened to Archi Listim, a chief bandit, who was asleep at the crossroads. Overchad, someone passes by, and he starts to wake him up. He says to him, get up. Because there is evil or danger in this place. Come, he woke up this bandit and he started to beat the passerby up. Omale, near Bishon, now danger or evil has woken up. Omale, the bandit says to him, he was asleep. And you woke him up. Kach Omala HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Thus says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, to Yaakov. He was going in his own way. And you sent a message to him. And what was the message? And you said to him, in a submissive way, after Yaakov, thus speaks your servant Yaakov. Now, we understand that perhaps Yaakov should have let sleeping dogs lie and avoid a confrontation with Esav. But how does the pasuk in Mishlei apply to this situation? Surely you cannot say that Yaakov resembles a passerby who gets embroiled in a quarrel that doesn't concern him. The Yaakov versus Esav conflict very much is Yaakov's affair. Furthermore, it seems strange that the Medrash puts words in the mouth of this bandit in the third person. He doesn't say, I was sleeping and you woke me up. No, he says he was sleeping and you woke him up, as if he's talking about someone else. When Yaakov receives word back from the messengers that Esav is coming to meet him and that Esav has 400 men with him, presumably armed, Yaakov is sorely afraid. The pasuk says about him, Vayira Yaakov ma'ot vayitzer lo. Yaakov was very frightened and was in distress. On this, Rashi says, Vayira Shema Yehorek. He was afraid lest he would be killed, understandably. Vayitzer lo, and he was in distress. Shema Yarok es acherim, lest he would kill someone else. Now, if you are familiar with Hebrew grammar, you should ask yourself why the word others, acherim, has the word S in front of it, because normally S, which indicates an object, it is the accusative indicator. This word S is normally used only in front of definite words, that is to say, either a noun with the definite article, ho acherim, the others, or a proper name. And acherim is neither a noun with a definite article nor a proper name. Now, Yaakov then takes protective measures. He divides his family into two camps, and then he brings them to the other side of the river that is presumably the border between the territory where Esav holds sway and the outside world. So he crosses, so to say, the Rubicon in the middle of the night. And after he has installed his tribe in these two camps, he goes back across the river in the middle of the night. And this is what the Torah says in chapter 32 from verse 25 onward. Vayivose Yaakov levado, and Yaakov remained alone. Vayeovek ish ima, and the man wrestled with him ad alos hashachar, until the daybreak. He saw that he couldn't overcome him. And he hit him on the inside of his hip, or on his the joint of his hip. And the hip joint of Yaakov was dislocated as a result of this fight with this man. Vayama, Sholochani, he said, let me go. Ki olo hashochar, because daybreak has come. Vayama, lo ashalechacho ki im berachtoni, I will not let you go unless you bless me. Vayama elov, and he said to him, Ma shemecha, what is your name? Vayama Yaakov, and he answered Yaakov. Vayama, Lo Yaakov Yeomer out Shimcho, your name shall no longer be called Yaakov, Ki im Yisrael, rather you should be called Yisrael. Ki sorisa im Elokim v'im Anushim, because you have fought with God and with men. Or maybe the translation should be, you fought with angels. Elohim can be said about angels. Vayishlach Yaakov, Vayama, and Yaakov asked and said, Hagidanos shemecho, let me know your name, make your name known to me. Vayama, lo mozeh tish'al lishmi, why do you inquire after my name? Vayivorach al Sarshon, and he blessed him there. Vayikro Yaakov Shem Hamokam Peniel, and Yaakov called this place Peniel, which means the face of God. Ki ro'isi Elokim ponim oponim vatinotzel nafshi, because I have seen God face to face, and I escaped with my life. Now, let's ask a few questions. First place, we must ask the question, why does the Torah say that Yaakov was alone there when he wasn't alone there? Because there was this man who came to wrestle with him. Why does the Torah emphatically say that Yaakov was alone? It could have said, and a man came to wrestle with Yaakov, without stating that Yaakov was alone. Another thing is that you must pay good attention to who is saying what. It says Vayama, 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 but it doesn't say Vayama Yaakov, Vayama Ho'ish, Vayama Yaakov. Normally, when the subject of a sentence changes, you would expect that the narrator would help you keep track of who says what. by saying, Vayama Yaakov, and Yaakov said, no, we have to figure it out ourselves. It seems that the Torah wants us to think very hard about this entire episode. Then another question that you should ask is, why does Yaakov insist that the man should bless him? What does he need a blessing from this man? Especially when you keep in mind that our sages say that this angel with whom he fought, this man with whom he fought, was actually an angel, and he was the angel of Esav, the Sorah Shel Esav, the guardian angel of Esav and his people. In order to make any sense of this narrative, we must remember who Esav is. He is Yaakov's brother, but he's also Yaakov's adversary. The entire reason for Yaakov's long exile in a hostile environment was the lethal threat that he had from Esav. Esav has good reasons for his hatred of his brother, because they have a conflict over the blessings. You remember that in Parshas Taldos, in chapter 27, the story is related how Yaakov, through trickery, obtains a bracha, a blessing that was meant for Esav, that Yitzchak, his father, wanted to give to Esav. Esav's anguish about the loss of this blessing is very deep and very heartfelt. We read about this bitterness and this anguish in Parshas Taldos in the 27th chapter. I will not quote the entire passage for lack of time, but please look it up for yourself. I'll just quote two verses, verse 34 and 38. In 34 it says, Yishma Esav es divrei aviv. When Esav heard the words of his father, that his brother had come to take his blessing away, to steal his blessing, so to say, Vayitzak tza'oka gedola umor ad ma'od. Then Esav cried with an exceedingly great and bitter cry. Vayama, and he said, La'aviv, to his father, Bo'acheni gam ani, Avi, please bless me as well, my father. And a bit later, in verse 38, it says, Vayama Esav el Aviv, Havarocha achas, he lecha, Avi, do you then have only one blessing, my father? He repeats this phrase, bless me as well. Vayisah Esav kolo, and Esav lifted up his voice, Vayevk, and he cried. Now you should know that the phrase, Vayisah as kolo, Vayevk, he lifted up his voice and he cried, is not a very commonly used expression in the Torah. It occurs actually only 3 times. It occurs in the episode about Hagar and Yishmael, who were sent out of the house of Avram. And when Yishmael was dying, was of exhaustion, of thirst, his mother Hagar could not abide by this scene. She could not see the suffering of her son, and she set herself down at some distance, not looking at the boy at all. And then it says, Batisa es kaulo vatev. She lifted up her voice and cried. This is one instance. The other instance is in last week's sermon, in Vayetze, when Yaakov meets Rachel. It says that he kissed her, Vayisah es kaulo vayevk. and he lifted up his voice and he cried. There we also have a medrash. The medrash says, I will come back to the medrash in a minute. The third time is in Taldas, the passage we quoted, the verse we quoted, Vayishlach Esav Kaulo Vayeft. Now, when this expression is used in last week's Seder, Yaakov meeting Rachel, kissing her, and then crying, we have also a medrash. The medrash there says he cried because he saw with Ruach HaKodesh, with divine inspiration, he saw prophetically that he would not be buried next to Rachel, that Rachel would be buried separately from him. She died young, she died in childbirth, and she was buried by the wayside. Whereas Yaakov, of course, was later on buried in the Moras HaMachpelah, in the cave of Machpelah, which is in Hebron. Now, to be buried next to one's beloved wife is something that each of us wants. To miss out on that means that for eternity you're going to be not next to your wife. I say for eternity, until the resurrection of the dead, obviously. The second medrash that is said about this crying of Yaakov is that Yaakov realized that he didn't have a penny to his name. He saw Rachel and he immediately decided, this is the wife for me, I want to marry her. But he would come empty-handed. How can he come to Rachel's father and ask for his daughter when he cannot even provide a decent bridal price, a decent bridal gift? His father never proposed directly to his wife Rivka, but his grandfather Avraham had sent Eliezer with an enormous amount of gifts to find a wife for Yitzchak, and he, Yaakov, would come empty-handed, and therefore he would be totally at the mercy of Rachel's father. Basically, Rachel's father could enslave him, as he did. For 7 years he had to work for Rachel, and then he was cheated, and Leah was brought into his tent rather than Rachel, and then he had to work for another 7 years for Rachel, all because he was penniless. Now, why was he penniless, says the Medrash? Because Esau, when he heard that Yaakov had fled, then Esau sent his son Eliphaz after Yaakov with the charge, kill the man. I command you to go and kill my brother, your uncle Yaakov. When Eliphaz came and caught up with Yaakov and lifted up his dagger to kill his uncle, he discovered he couldn't do it because he grew up in the house of Yitzchak, and that leaves an impression. He couldn't do it. At the same time, he said to Yaakov, what am I going to do? I didn't kill you. My father commanded me to kill you. And how can I come back to my father and say to him that I didn't do what he had charged me with, that he had commanded me? And then Yaakov says to Eliphaz, according to the Medrash, you know what you do? Take my money, and then you can go to your father and claim I am dead, because Oni nechshav kames, and a poor man is considered to be dead. Now, mind you, what brought Yaakov in this situation in the first place? The fact that he deceived his father, that he lied, outright lie. When his father said, "Are you Esav?" He said, "Yes, I'm Esav." And now he tells Eliphaz, you can wriggle yourself out of this predicament that you find yourself in. You just lie to your father. It's a white lie. There is some justification, because indeed, Oni Nershav Kameis, but is that meant literally? Does it mean that when you rob somebody, you commit murder? Surely not. This anguish that Esav felt over the brachas, over the blessings, this yearning of Boacheni Gam Oni Ovi, please, please, Father, bless me as well. This lives on in the psyche of Edom, the Esav people. Who are these people? Who is Edom? Surely the Edomites are not around anymore. Not so according to our sages, because our sages unerringly state, Edom zu Romi. Edom, that is Rome. We would call this today Western civilization, which is really a weasel word. I mean, what Western civilization? Where is that West? Around the West Pole, as opposed to the East Pole? In earlier times, a different word was used for this culture, and it used to be called Christendom. And that is far more honest to call it that. Because although Christianity in today's world, let's say, is not what it used to be, the dominating religious outlook of an entire world, an entire civilization. Recently in the United Kingdom, where I live, the results of the last census in 2021, I think it was, has shown that less than 50% of the inhabitants of these islands identify themselves as Christians. Now, what do our sages mean when they say Edom zu Romi? You should realize that the claims of Christianity to have its origin in the Judaism of the first century, that in this context is merely a distraction. Whatever scholarship says about it, when Rome adopted Christianity as its state religion, it was not in any sense a Jewish, a faith of Jewish origin that prevailed over the Roman Empire. It is rather the contrary. Rather than Rome converting to Christianity, we should say that Christianity converted to Rome. And we know this. The two disastrous Jewish wars, the first Jewish war that ended with the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, of the temple, that occurred in the end of the first century of the Common Era, and then later the even more disastrous Bar Kokhba revolt in the early second century of the Common Era. These two wars removed Judaism from being a threat to the world dominance of Rome. We should not underestimate the importance of these wars for Rome. They were by far the greatest conflict with a rebellious nation that Rome has ever fought. Rome has had all kinds of skirmishes and outright wars in their attempts to dominate the world, but nowhere did they meet this resistance stronger than among the Jews. And there's a good reason for that, because Jews can live anywhere and under any type of regime or any type of political system, but a system that demands from them that they recognize the emperor as the lord over the world, the commander-in-chief of the world. This runs contrary to the Jewish confession of the one God, the one creator, who is the ultimate power in the world. In this context, after having been defeated by Rome twice, Judaism was forced into survival mode. If we trace the confrontation between Rome and the Jewish people to its historical roots, we must go back some centuries to the Hasmonean dynasty that ruled the land of Israel after the successful Maccabean revolt, which we will, of course, pay close attention to in the coming weeks when it will be Hanukkah. In that Hasmonean revolt, in that Maccabean revolt, the leader of the Jewish nation, Yehuda HaMaccabi, had sent messages to a delegation to Rome to propose a treaty of friendship between the Roman Republic, the empire didn't exist yet, and the emerging independent Jewish nation. This treaty of friendship was concluded. An eternal friendship was proclaimed between the two nations. And this friendship would give each of them almost the obligation to assist the other party in the treaty with military and economic assistance whenever they needed it. This took place in the year 161 before the Common Era. Then the Hasmoneans became kings. They were, of course, Kohanim, they were priests, and they were not supposed to become kings, but they usurped the kingship and became quite a successful monarchy. The strongest they became under the rule of Alexander Yanai HaMelech, who died. He was a horrible man. I mean, he killed our Chachamim, he killed our sages, and even though his wife was Queen Alexandra Salome, who we call Shlom Tzion HaMalka, and Shlom Tzion HaMalka was the sister of Shimon Bar Shetach, one of the leading Chachamim of that era. When her husband died, she took over as queen, and she was a very good queen. But after she died, her two sons, who were called Hyrcanos and Aristobulus, they started fighting with each other over the inheritance of the Hasmonean throne. And each of them, in turn, appealed to the Roman Senate for assistance against his own brother. And they did so by invoking this old treaty of friendship between Yehuda HaMaccabi and the Roman Senate. Rome saw its chance to get involved in the affairs of an independent state at their borders, because they were fighting wars all around. They were fighting wars in northern Syria. They were fighting wars in the Caucasus, all to impose their will on foreign nations. And this was a golden opportunity for Rome. They sent their greatest general, Pompey, whose Roman name was Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus. And Pompey came with his armies. And tragically, what started as a struggle against the Hellenistic culture, as we celebrated in the Hanukkah prayers and in the Hanukkah story, this struggle against Hellenism ended with Jews themselves inviting Esau, inviting Edom, to become the vehicle for that self-same Hellenistic corruption and culture. And thus Rome infiltrated politically and militarily and culturally the Jewish people. Then imposed their rule over the kingdom after their puppet king Herod failed to establish a dynasty there, then Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, became Roman possession and under direct Roman control. And this ultimately, of course, led to the Roman-Jewish wars and the long and bitter exile of our people. Maybe now we can understand a little bit this medrash about the chief bandit who was sleeping at the crossroads. The passerby who mixed himself into the conflict that was not of his own concern, that was a conflict between other people in the medrash, seemingly referring to the man who innocently wakes up this sleeping bandit, is in fact a hint to the Roman power who gets involved in a fight between two brothers that was none of their concern, by the invitation of those self-same brothers. This is how the Medrash wants to read the verse in Mishneh. Grabbing the ears of a passing dog, who then gets involved in a conflict that is none of his business. So it is the dog that is passing by. So we read, Va'ozne kelef over misaber alif lolo. And it is, of course, dafka, the ears of the dog that are grabbed, because this is the words of these brothers, Hyrcanos and Aristobulus, who each in turn said with their voice to the Roman ear, come here and help me. So what is the conflict in which the passerby, the passing dog, mixes himself in? It is the conflict between two brothers who fight over the inheritance of their family. So, does it sound familiar? It's Yaakov and Esau. It's exactly Yaakov and Esau, a fight between two brothers. Yaakov, of course, took the initiative to try and heal the broken relationship with his brother Esau. There's something in Esau that makes it worthwhile for Yaakov to heal that rift. However threatening and however murderous Esau's intentions may be, Yaakov is willing to take that risk, but he is sorely afraid. He is sorely afraid that he might be killed himself, but he's also in distress because he may kill others. How are we to understand that? Well, the Mishnah very often quotes an opinion. It says Rabbi XYZ says this, Rabbi ABC says that. Acherim Amrim, others say, and then it brings another opinion. We have a tradition which is well established that whenever the Mishnah says Acherim Amrim, it is Shittas Rabbi Meir, it is the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Acherim Amrim means Rabbi Meir said. And who is Rabbi Meir? Rabbi Meir was a Talmid, a disciple of Rabbi Akiva, who died a martyr's death in the Hadrianic persecutions of the period of the Bar Kokhba revolt and its consequences afterwards. This Rabbi Meir was a Roman convert to Judaism. He was a born Roman, one of many such Roman converts to Judaism. Rabbi Akiva himself was a descendant of Roman converts. And there are other converts from foreign nations that we can name, Shmael, Avtalion, Ben Bakbak and Ben Hey, both also originally Romans. And not to forget Onkelos, whose Roman name was Aquila, who was a kinsman, a nephew of the Jew-hating Emperor Hadrian himself. Yaakov's struggle with Esau is on the one hand a conflict with an external adversary. Esau had a Rome you want to Christianity, Western civilization. But on the other hand, it's also an internal conflict. Like those two Hasmonean princes, Hyrcanos and Aristobulus, was an internal family feud. Esau and Yaakov were twins. Now we can read the story of Yaakov's confrontation with the man who wrestles with him in the middle of the night a little bit better. The dialogue between the two can be read as an external dialogue between Yaakov and the man, but there is an aspect in it which is an internal dialogue, an intra-Jewish dialogue between Yaakov and Esau, but Esau is his twin. In a sense, it is a discussion between Yaakov and himself, an inner dialogue. Of course, this doesn't take away from the straightforward reading that it's a conversation between Yaakov and the man, the angel who met him. But we are justified to take into account that the Torah so carefully mixes up the Vayomer, and doesn't identify who says what. And thereby, I believe, it's hinting to this internal aspect of the dialogue. And what is the question? The question is, what's your name? Are you Yaakov or are you Yisrael? Yaakov is the name of our people in exile. You see this all through, for example, the book of Yeshayahu, the book of Isaiah. Yaakov, Al tiro avdi Yaakov, do not fear my servant Yaakov. Yisrael is the name of our nation, not longer in exile, but taking its rightful place as the nation that has suffered and overcome and prevailed. So Yaakov asked himself, are you still Yaakov? Or have you earned the name Yisrael? Now, finally, it is revealing that Esau's angel should bless Yaakov. What is the job of Esau's angel? What is the job of the guardian angel of a nation? He must look after his nation. He is deputized by God to look after his charge, his nation. And he must look after his nation and see to it that his nation gets everything that it needs. Now, Esau wants the bracha, Esau wants the blessing. But since Yaakov has received the blessings and had to flee from Esau as a consequence, then his father Yitzchak equipped him with the Birkas Avram, the blessing of Avram. See at the end of Toldos in chapter 28, beginning of chapter 28. There, Yitzchak says to Yaakov, V'yitin lecho es Birkas Avram, and God shall give to you the bracha, the blessing of Avram. One may ask, what kind of blessing is this? One may ask, is this the blessing of Avram himself, meaning the blessing with which Avram was blessed, or is it the blessing that Avram can provide to others? For sure, it is the blessing that Avram received. But at the same time, in that blessing that Avram received, right in the beginning of Parshas Lech Lecha, in chapter 12, Avram gets the opportunity or the ability to bless others. Let's listen to the words. Vayomer Hashem el Avram lech lecha me'artzecho me'miladecho me'beis avicho ele oretz asher arecho. Hashem, God says to Avram, leave your land, go, leave your father's house, leave your family, leave your birthplace, and go to the land that I will show to you. And then comes the blessing. Ve'eschol gai godal, and I will make you into a great nation. Va'avorechacho, and I will bless you. Va'agad lo shemecha, and I will magnify your name. I will make your name great. And you shall be a blessing. How shall you be a blessing? I will bless those who bless you. But somebody who takes you lightly, I will curse. Even has a little bit of a connotation. I will enlighten him. From the language of Ar means light. And through you will be blessed all the nations of the world. So how can the angel, the guardian angel of Asaph, obtain a blessing for his people, for his protege, for Asaph? It is by blessing Yaakov. And this is, of course, confirmed by Yitzchak also when he blesses Yaakov in chapter 28, verse 14. Echoing the words said to Avram, and in your offspring, through your offspring. So the ability to convey blessings on the world is not just for Avram, it is for Avram, for Yitzchak, for Yaakov, and all their offspring. No wonder that Yaakov now insists that the angel of Asaph should bless him. It is a gift that he gives to Asaph. And later on, when he insists that Asaph should accept his gifts of these animals that he sends to him, we also find that Yaakov says, take my blessing, take my bracha. Whoever blesses Yaakov will be themselves blessed. Yaakov confronts his brother because a rift between brothers, whatever the cause of that rift may be, and wherever the rights and the wrongs are in this conflict, a rift between two brothers is always a tragedy and cannot bring blessing. Those Hasmonean princes, Hyrcanus and Aristobulus, brought disaster over our people. They caused this long and bitter exile, which we call Golus Edom, the exile under Edom, under Asaph. If today we have a rift between brothers in our own people, be it between Ashkenazim and Sfardim, or religious versus secular, black hat versus modern Orthodox, whatever it may be, and wherever the right and the wrongs are, let us remember that a conflict between brothers will never bring blessing. The last of our holy prophets, Malachi, the last book in Treoso, in the minor prophets, Malachi says in the second chapter, 10th verse, Halau of echot lechulanu, halau kel echot bra'anu. Do we not have one Father? Is it not one Creator who created us? Madua nivgat ish ba'ochi. Why should one brother betray the other brother? Lechalel bris avaseinu, to desecrate the covenant of our ancestors. How can we ever fulfill our sacred mission to teach humanity how to live together as creatures of one God and thus be worthy of his blessing if we ourselves cannot do so?